Hello, welcome to Looking Through the Glass today. We are so thankful for all of our listeners. Just let you all know, we have Giselle, and today we have Larry Brandt, who is a Navy chaplain and has been for quite some time. And we're going to discuss moral injury today. Larry Brandt, I'm going to hand it right on off to you.
Okay. Well, they've asked me to kind of give a background on myself. So I'm 61. I turned 62 this summer. Been married to my beautiful bride in June. Will be 40 years. And we have three children and two grandchildren. How I got started on this adventure was I was an associational pastor for well, I guess associate pastor, not associational, associate pastor in several churches for 25 years. And then in my last church, which was in Lincoln, Nebraska, was approached by, we had some firefighters and police officers in our congregation. And they approached me and said, "Hey, we think you have the right temperament to be a volunteer chaplain for our city. Would you be interested in that?" And so I went to the senior pastor because I wanted to make sure I didn't do anything without his permission. And he was fine with it. And so I started down that road. And that was in 2002. And uh, over the next few years, ended up leading the ministry for the city and had about 30 volunteer chaplains that I worked with and supervised. Um, and we did ministry with the police department, ministry with the fire department, and it was very enjoyable, very rewarding being able to walk into the office of the mayor or the office of the police chief or the fire chief or any of those farther down the ladder and just saying, "How can I pray for you today? What's going on? How can I help you in any way and pray for you?" And that was very rewarding, and being able to help people sometimes at their worst hour uh, was uh, I don't want to say enjoyable because you don't want to enjoy when someone has a terrible day, but it was very fulfilling to be able to make a
Felt
difference.
very purposeful.
Yeah, very. Thank you. Very purposeful. Very good. Here, I'm supposed to be the wordsmith, and you're the one doing it. You're doing good.
So that was the word that popped in my head. Sorry.
No, that's great. That was terrific. And then in 2007, my wife and I went to a denominational training for chaplains. And while we were there, um, I started to feel like God was telling me that He wanted me to be a military chaplain. And like Moses at the burning bush, I tried to tell God all of the reasons why He was wrong. And so uh, I thought I had
I love
Him.
those conversations.
Yeah,
Those
really.
are very pinnacle conversations that we have. That I love those conversations.
Exactly. And as I gave God every reason, it seemed like the very next session they got struck down. The first one was, "Well, God, I'm too old." We go to the next session, they start talking about how the Army and the Navy are giving age waivers for people above the age limit. And then I was like, "Okay, God, but I don't have the right master's degree. You got to have a master of divinity." I actually have two other master's degrees. I had a master's in leadership and a master's in church music because I was the worship pastor. Uh, and the next session, granted, this was 2007, so 19 years ago now. Um, they started talking about this brand new thing, online accredited schools that the military was taking. And so I was like, "Okay, well, that's two." And I thought I had God hard on this third one because at that point in time, I weighed over 300 pounds. And God said, "There's this thing called diet and diet and exercise." And so I said, "Okay, God, um, I'll do this if this is what you want me to do, but I am terrified to tell my wife." And so as we were going back to the room that night, I was trying to figure out how I was going to break this to my wife and just kind of rock her world. Um, we get into the room and she spins around, puts her finger in my face, and says, "I think God's calling you to be a military chaplain." And so I was like, well, if that's not confirmation, I don't know what is. And so as
Absolutely.
we began talking about all of the changes that this would entail, I remember I remember her saying this very vividly, that if God is calling us to do this, how can we do anything else?
Amen
And
to
so
that.
the next day we spoke with our denominational folk that was there. Uh, they were encouraging, but they were also honest and said, you've got an uphill battle here. You'll have to get an age waiver, you'll have to get another degree, and you're going to have to get into shape. And so over the next year and a half, that's what I set about doing. And for Christmas that year, my wife bought me hours with a personal trainer. Or as I swear, she tried to pay a 22-year-old to kill me. Sure, seen that one at least at first. But I brought the young man. I told him, I said, "This is what I have to do physically. This is where I need to be." And he didn't laugh. He didn't joke. He actually just sat down and set up a plan to help me get there. And in 18 months, I was there. In 18 months, I had an age waiver. I had a Master of Divinity because some of my other masters transferred in, so I didn't have to take all of the classes. And I was 110 pounds lighter. Um, and
Talk
so,
about the God qualifies the called, right?
yeah, uh, and don't get me wrong, it wasn't easy. There were
Oh
times that
no.
I was very frustrated. I'd plateaued. And I was ready to call it quits. And my bride just said, did God call you to this or not? Well, yeah, he did. Well, turn around, get back to it. Yes, ma'am. Okay, I will. Uh, I make her sound mean, but she said it in a loving
She sounds
way.
like an amazing woman to me.
She really is. How she's not smothered me in my sleep for the last 40 years is just unbelievable. Um, but as we did that, and went forward, then the first thing that happened after I came in, so I joined the Navy at the age of 45, which is right about the age that a lot of people, it's not many
Retire.
years after that that they retire from the military.
Yeah.
Uh, but So I joined at 45, and a little over a year later, found myself with a Marine Infantry Battalion on the front lines in Afghanistan. And
Wow.
that was one of the most terrifying and one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. Uh, Being there, it was hard, it was difficult, but I also found like I felt like I was right in the middle of God's will, that's where
Yeah.
He wanted me to be, uh, and um, that was where I began to really, I saw it some with the police department, the PTSD. Um, I didn't really see much of the moral injury. I didn't really understand what it was then. Um, but there on the front lines, I began to see both. I just didn't know the term moral injury at that time, but I began to see it. And quite frankly, from my combat experience, I realize now that I have PTSD myself
I bet.
from, when someone tries to kill you, that kind of gives it to you. Uh,
Yes.
and that
I
was it.
understand it from the domestic side.
Yes, and it doesn't, just as you said, it doesn't have to be military. It can be in several other circumstances as well. And the
Hmm.
same for moral injury. The moral injury, as I'll describe it here in a moment, it doesn't have to be just from a military perspective. People have
No.
thought that for years, but the truth is, as they began to research it more, it could be in several other situations as well. So then fast
Especially when it
forward,
come talks about in like my community recovery, in the
yeah,
recovery community.
yes. Uh,
Sorry to interrupt.
no, you're fine. You're fine. Fast forward. a few years, and I'm selected for a education program in the Navy so that I could become a hospital chaplain. In order to be a hospital chaplain, you have to have an additional education called clinical pastoral education, or CPE for short. So the Navy has a CPE program on the West Coast and the East Coast. So I went out to the West Coast to San Diego. It's co-run with the VA. And so I got what they call 4 units of CPE, which is a year, and then 2 residencies. I did a residency at Naval Hospital San Diego and a residency with the VA. And with the with that was right at the height of COVID. So with the residency I did at the Naval Hospital San Diego, I was the ICU chaplain. So we were seeing um, people die from COVID every single day. We were
Yeah.
losing at least one a day.
Wow.
And it was, horrific for the families. Sometimes we would see a father pass in November and a mother pass in January. Um, and the
Yeah.
adult children, just struggling. That actually happened more than once while I was there. Um, and then the frustration from the healthcare workers, the doctors and the nurses and all of the support staff, that just feeling like they're complete and total failures because they're just losing people left and right from this.
Yes.
Um, and they're just, they're losing their self-confidence. They're feeling guilty. They're feeling shameful because they don't feel, because they can't stop this. As I'm sure people in many other uh, facilities were feeling that exact same
Exact
way.
same thing.
Um,
Yeah. That was a the
and
world was feeling that way.
yeah, exactly. And as weird as it may sound, I saw more death in that ICU than I did on the battlefield in Afghanistan.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Um, and so then when that residency ended, I went to the VA, and they placed me in a wonderful place called the Aspire Center. And I really champion this because I really think the VA should consider uh, creating a place like this in every large city. But right now, the only place they have it is San Diego. And what the Aspire Center does was it takes homeless veterans who are diagnosed with PTSD off the streets of San Diego. Uh, they give them a place to stay for 6 months. They help them get clean. They help them address their PTSD and their moral injury to help them stay clean.
Yeah.
And they help them find housing, and they help them find a job so that they don't go back out on the streets. And they've got about an 85% success rate.
That's
And
amazing.
the staff there is just second to none. They
It
are
is
just
absolutely
so,
something that is needed throughout the entire
oh, I
country.
completely agree. Completely agree.
Yeah.
And the staff there is just so dedicated to these veterans. Um, they just, you know, the time I was there, that staff just placed me in awe of how hard and how hard they work and how dedicated they are to these veterans to making their lives better. And another thing that I really enjoyed was that the chaplain, uh, in some facilities, the chaplain is just kind of cursory there, just kind of floats around, you know, and does some services here, some prayer and counseling there. But at the Aspire Center, uh, the chaplain has an equal seat at the table. And so when they're planning um, how to work with a particular resident, uh, the chaplain is there to represent, to remind the folks, okay, this is the spiritual perspective of this resident, what we need to honor. And here's, using this spiritual perspective, here's how we can address some of his issues. And I really enjoyed being able to do that and make
Yeah,
a
that
difference
would
in some of those folks'
yeah,
lives.
absolutely.
And so when I left there, my assignment was to come to Naval Hospital 29 Palms, which is at the Marine Corps base in 29 Palms, California. And it's Size wise, it's the largest Marine Corps base because they do desert warfare training. And in the course of a year, we'll have 50,000 Marines, sailors, and foreign military come through this base to go through the training programs that we have.
Wow.
So, uh, and one of the things we do here is we also run religious ministry teams through a specialized training when they come here, so that they're prepared for deployment as well. And we'll make sure that they are good to go on their training and readiness. We'll teach them how to do a memorial in the field, how to build a hasty memorial. We'll teach them um, mass casualty in the field, because how a religious ministry team approaches mass casualty is the exact opposite of how the medical team does it. And the reason why is so that, number one, we minister to the spiritual needs of the wounded, but as well as we don't get in the way of the medical, trying to save those lives.
Yeah.
Uh, and then another thing we'll do is we'll teach them movement under fire. No, we don't actually shoot at them. I want to make that clear. We don't shoot at them, but we do teach them how to do movement under fire, which is way better than how I moved, or how I learned, which was the actual movement under fire. Um,
Hmm.
and that way they're so much better prepared uh, to minister to their people uh, when they're deployed. But as we do that, and as we came here, my thinking was, why are we waiting for these veterans to be on homeless on the streets before we start addressing some of these issues? Now, that doesn't mean we don't have mental health providers that's working with our active duty folks. We have outstanding mental health providers, but we really weren't doing a good job of pairing that with the spiritual. And
Yes.
so what I did was I took a program that the VA had with their permission, spoke to the people who created it, and they gave me carte blanche. Um, and I tweaked it for active duty. And so I pitched the idea to my hospital leadership, and I said, well, what if we did this 8-week course that the VA does? And it's called Building Spiritual Strength. And what it does is it addresses PTSD and moral injury from the spiritual perspective, and helps these individuals to use their faith that they may already have, or may want to reconnect to, or maybe discover a new faith if they
Mhm.
don't have one. Um, to use that, not only to get closer in their faith, but also to use it to mitigate their PTSD and moral injury. And so they were right on board with it. Matter of fact, the executive officer of the hospital, who was a clinical psychiatrist, he said, "Chaps, can I lead this with you?" And I said, "I think that would be wonderful." So he and I began leading the group, and we really saw great changes in the people who went through it. And because our thinking was, if we do this now, before they're homeless, maybe we can save some careers, some marriages, and also possibly some lives.
And
And
more PTSD on top of and trauma on top of what they've already experiencing,
exactly.
because
And
that's what PTSD and that's what it does when it's not addressed, is it only creates more PTSD on top of the other PTSD.
exactly. And uh, maybe lessen the trauma that's going on in the home.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so as we began to do that, we saw just some phenomenal changes in our folks. And it was very exciting to see. And then my ever wise wife said, "Well, don't you think now is time for you to go back to school and get your doctorate?" And I was like, "I just went through school to get here. I really don't want to go through school again." And she said, "But you're going to shore command. So, plus what you're doing with this PTSD and moral injury, that could be what you do for your doctorate." And I just hate it when she makes so much sense, because I
That's
just
your
don't have an argument against that. So, so while I'm doing this other stuff and working at the hospital, I began working on my doctoral program. And uh, as I spoke with pastors, both at different places I've been to in my military career, and thinking back on my own pastoral experience, and also talking to civilian chaplains with law enforcement, fire chaplains, um, outside healthcare chaplains, um, I realized that
Sorry.
right, there was a fair understanding among civilian ministry of PTSD, but not a very good understanding of moral injury. So now at this point, I'm going to kind of describe both. You know, if for your listeners or watchers, if they don't understand, PTSD, as you said, is something that happens to you, and it's fear-based trauma, and it just wrecks you emotionally, uh, maybe sometimes even physically. Um, and it makes you fearful. It makes you paranoid. Um, it makes you distrustful uh, because of that fear-based trauma. You just don't know who you can trust. Who is going to be the other person that's going to betray you or hurt you? And what moral injury is, it's kind of like the ugly side of the coin, ugly other side of a coin. What moral injury is, that's when we do something sometimes under the direction of someone in authority over us, or we fail to prevent something, and the result of which goes against everything we believe in, morally, ethically, and especially spiritually. And sometimes it's when the person doesn't really have a good decision to make because of the situation they're in. They're put in the position to where, okay, here's a bad decision, here's a worse decision, and that will just fill them with guilt, with shame. Uh, they'll believe that they are unlovable and unforgivable. Um, they will believe that they are corrupted. I've even heard some say that they are filled with evil, and then they begin to withdraw from everything. They withdraw from their faith. They withdraw from their family and their friends. And they're not withdrawing because they hate these people. They're actually withdrawing because they're afraid that if they're corrupted and they hang around these people, they're going to corrupt their friends and family as well. So they withdraw, they begin to self medicate. I personally believe, we see all of the things about the veterans and how many die by suicide a day. I don't think that's just PTSD related. I think a lot of that is also moral injury related because
Absolutely.
um, sometimes they get to the point where they feel like they're such a burden to everyone that the best thing, most noble thing they can do is remove themselves so that they're no longer a burden.
Yep.
Yeah.
Uh, and so as we began working with that, I would talk with these pastors and chaplains in the civilian world, and they'd have the good understanding of PTSD, but they just had no concept of the moral injury. And I would ask them, what is moral injury? And they would say they didn't know. But then when I would explain it, every single chaplain, every single pastor, without exception, said, I know who that describes. They immediately, a name would come to mind to them of who that describes. And
Yeah.
then we would talk about how they could reach out to that person and come alongside that person, companion with them in their pain, and help them eventually see a path for restoration. So that was my doctoral project for my doctor of ministry, and in
What
doing
a
that,
hell of a project.
my again my wife, my dissertation committee, my dissertation editor, all of them were like, this really needs to be a book for the masses. That this doesn't need to just be your doctoral dissertation. You need to take this once you're done, put it into a book, and get it out there. And um, so that's exactly what I did. A friend of mine in the Oklahoma VA introduced me to his publisher, and so we went from there. And so last week released the book, which is called Restoring the Broken. So if you go on Amazon, you type in my name, Larry Brandt, or you type in Restoring the Broken, and the book will pop up. And was very blessed in that one day it went to number one in three different categories.
Oh, I bet. Giselle, I'm sorry,
And
but you stopped recording.
so was very blessed because the whole purpose why I read it, I didn't write it to get rich. Uh, but what I did write it for was to get that message out, to educate people on what moral injury is, what the church can do about it, and what individuals who understand it can do about it. And then also for the people who may have it to understand that there is a path back for restoration.
Yeah. Yeah,
It, it
I agree. It is something that is absolutely needed in the masses out there because you've got people that are in prison. You've got people that are that in my era growing up, the gangs, they like in Las Vegas, the gangs were somebody or something where that I personally like you're talking about it and I'm like this person, this person, this person, this person that
Mhm.
I grew up with, you know. So it's definitely something needed for the masses, for the world.
Well, and I think in the church world, um, we have mistaken moral injury for other things. Uh,
Hmm.
Sometimes we've mistaken it for burnout. Sometimes we've mistaken it for backsliding. I think
Hmm.
sometimes we've mistaken it just for um being tired or being selfish. Uh, and sometimes when uh, people suffering with this, uh, they come and talk to the ministry leader, and because the ministry leader doesn't really understand what's going on, um, sometimes they'll give them a scripture, which is never bad, uh, but they just try to do the quick fix. You know, they give them a scripture, they pray, they pat them on the back and say, "Okay, you're good now," and that's just not what does it for moral injury.
Hmm.
Um, with moral injury, um, you kind of have to sit with them in their pain, not deny it, um, but sit with them in it, companion with them in it, listen to their stories. That's a big one. Is if they feel safe enough to share with you their story, you need to listen to it and not react. So many people they're not used to hearing the stories that cause moral injury because sometimes they can be quite shocking. Uh,
Hmm.
and then if they react with shock or horror, then that's going to shut the person down
Mm-hmm.
and they're just going to retreat farther back. But if they can find a safe place to share that story, whether it be a veterans group or with a pastor, with a ministry leader, uh, even to the point of being able to share with their own family, um, you know, with their spouse and with their children. And obviously, when you're talking about children, you may have to uh, edit for the children. Um, but um, being able to do that because they will push their family away sometimes for decades. And
They're
but
better off. They're
once
better
they
off is what's
feel
going through their head.
mhm, they're afraid that if they share what they've done or how they chose not to intervene in something that happened, and if they share it with their friends and family, number one, they're afraid they'll corrupt them. Number two, they're afraid they'll be rejected as a monster.
Hmm.
And what we try to do is help them see. And what I tried to do with the writing of this book is to help people understand this is what they're going through, this is their mindset, and this is how you can come alongside them and begin to help them walk back from this.
Yeah, I can understand how, like, this can affect people. Like, people can be affected by or moral injury, not even understand what they're going through themselves. Like, I'm looking at, like, I can think of so many different things, so many different, ways. Wow.
I
Well, what were you going to say?
I was gonna say there's a lot of I feel like there's a lot of build up to it too, like having like an inner critic. We have a lot of talk about that on here, having an inner critic where you really are hard on yourself, you're constantly beating yourself up, and or having your it starts with the little voice and it just can build up to that moral injury where you retract.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. I was as I was talking with one individual from the Aspire Center a few years ago. He was there for two reasons. Number one, once he retired from the Marine Corps, he didn't know who he was anymore. His identity was so wrapped up in being a Marine that once he retired, he was just totally lost. That because he had forgotten who he was outside of being a Marine. And we had to help remind him that he was also a husband, a father, um, a grandfather, uh, that there were important things in being among that. But another thing he was dealing with was um, the moral injury of, especially in one battle, how many people he had killed.
Mm.
And he said, I knew it was us or them, but as I think about it now, I killed several people made in God's image, and I'm really struggling with that. And so, again, that was one of those situations between what's bad, what's worse. What's bad? Killing people trying to kill you. What's worse? Letting them kill
You
you.
not going home. That's what's worse, is you not going home, and
Exactly.
that's what they're faced with, and that's
That's
in
what they're faced
every moment, waking moment, that they're making these decisions, and it just one on top of the other.
with. And,
Like, the
and that's
depths to the injury is just wow.
in the military context. In the first responder context, you got someone coming up on a situation in a first responder. They do everything that they can, but the person doesn't survive anyway. Uh, and they're just, that inner critic just comes in and tells them, well, the reason why they didn't survive is because you're awful at your job. You're terrible.
Mm-hmm.
You can't make a good decision. You can't save people. Why are you even here?
Yeah.
And that can happen in healthcare as well, as I described, especially during COVID. They did a study, I believe it was Duke University and the VA did a study that showed uh, during COVID, healthcare workers were more exposed to moral injurious trauma than uh, most people in combat.
Wow.
And we're wondering why we're hemorrhaging people in the healthcare industry.
Because
That
what
I
it
think
entails.
I think that's a big part of it. You look in the corporate world, people in the corporate world. You put out this report, you make sure it says this, this, and this, even though it's not true. Being told to do that by someone in authority over you.
And in
I've
order to keep your job and provide for your
in order
family,
to keep your job, you have to lie on this report, go against everything you believe in. So
and
the
Yeah.
that's we're finding out how much that has been happening in this world.
I mean,
Like,
you have
and
defense lawyers too.
yeah, there you go.
mm-hmm.
So we can see that in several different contexts. And as you were saying, people who have suffered physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse. Um, they experience this as well, especially as the perpetrator keeps telling them the reason why I'm doing this is you. I'm
Yep.
doing this because this is your fault. Um, and just continues to berate them and tell them that the reason why they're being abused is it's their fault. And then they come to believe it. And they're then at that point, they are experiencing not only the PTSD from the trauma, but also the moral injury of believing that all of that is their fault.
Hold on. Whew. Sorry, that hit a
I
little bit
know.
harder
Thank
than I
you.
thought. That hit a
I'm
lot
glad
harder
I'm
than I
not the
thought.
only one.
I didn't mean to make you cry. I'm so sorry.
Oh no, no.
No, no.
You don't realize it until somebody else outside of you says it, and that is where it really hit me because I have to keep reminding myself that. And it's something
Mhm.
I have to keep telling myself is that I wasn't the cause, even though that's what's in my head. That's what I was told. That was the problem. I let it on. And so, no, thank you. That
Yeah.
hearing the words from somebody else is
Whew.
so thank you.
You're
Oh,
welcome. You're welcome.
we both needed
Both
a
of you
moment
had
there.
what
Yeah.
really threw me was both of you had the same reaction at the exact same time. Uh,
Generational.
yeah.
It's
Hmm.
generational. I okay, so I take faith a little bit further than some people, and I am a firm believer that gnawing, that inner critic, is not good. That it is not um and you know, some people go, you're crazy, but I do believe that there is war going on, you know,
Oh.
and that is so unseen. And I believe that that's a, for me personally, because it has, you know, I have tried in those in my what would you call them, flashbacks, you
Hmm.
know, because I literally suffered from, I had flashbacks, especially after hitting my head, the head injury on top of the undiagnosed and untreated PTSD and moral injuries involved, that it just went into this insane amount level. And I would have, like, we would call them my angry seizures, but they were
Hmm.
literally flashbacks is what they were.
Hmm.
But that little, that, like, there, it's almost like I've always seen like this little creature, like, for that, from a certain point it was almost like I've started visioning it as a little creature sitting on my shoulder talking to me, instead of it being me, instead of it me being myself, I turned it into outside of me, is
Hmm.
what I that's what I've personally done, you know, that's kind of helped me. But I do believe that it also is not fully us. You know, we're put here purposefully, with purpose and on purpose.
Yep. Could not agree more. And it's interesting how, uh, with this, someone asked me the other day, um, is some folk who experience trauma as children, are they more likely to experience moral injury later down the road? And um, I think the answer is yes. I don't have any definitive data to back that up, just personal experience. In that, what I have seen is that in the military, is that those who seem to be the most traumatized uh, from their military experience kind of almost came in traumatized as well from their childhood. That doesn't mean that if you had a good childhood, you're imperious when you come in. But what I have seen was that it seems to be the worst cases that I have worked with also have childhood trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and how that childhood trauma has kind of stripped away um, that initial layer of resilience that most of us tend to have.
Yeah.
I can
Oh,
absolutely see that. Yeah.
I had something and then it totally went out the door.
Yeah, you got. I'm still stuck on the.
Yeah,
Wow,
that really got me. But I did want to say,
that was very powerful explanation, and I really hope that it really, I really hopes that it goes far. You know, that message goes far, and that it really goes to the places that God needs it to go, because there's so many that are in need of that. And like I said, like you were stating, you know, just somebody that's from a childhood, something that they've had absolutely no control over. And these people are, you know, literally taking themselves off this planet because of things that they had no control over, that they had to make a decision, and they only had bad choices. Like
Mhm.
they weren't given any good choices out of the matter.
Yeah, completely. You know, you think about, uh, now, granted, I keep going to the military example because that's what I know
Well, that's
best. Uh, but, you know, you think about the Marine who is on guard in a combat zone and he sees a pregnant woman with a suicide vest on, and
and it happens.
she's coming toward the gate that he's guarding, and he gets told, um, you know, if she refuses to stop, you have to kill her. And so
yeah,
he knows, then he knows what he needs to do, because that's the best way to, for him and his battle buddies to survive, and that the gate not be breached. Uh, but he also realizes that to do that, he has to kill a human being and her unborn child. Um,
And that is soul
and
soul
then that
cracking.
just, that just haunts that individual. They come back home, they get married, and then every time they look at their own child, they think about the child they killed.
Hmm.
yeah.
Yep.
That and that nobody thinks about that actually. Now
And
that
then them
we're
not
talking
feeling
about it,
safe enough anywhere to be able to discuss this,
Hmm.
especially, you know, especially to your wife, someone that you know that you should be, but they're scared because they feel that they're going to be looked at so differently, that the view is going to change, and that they're going to hate them as much as they hate themselves.
Correct. Correct. And then as we begin to work with them, and they begin to tell their stories, one thing that's so important is, you know, the groups that we do, they're about, you know, no more than 6 to 8. Uh, um, and so in those 8 weeks, uh, those people get really close. And they'll start, you know, we'll ask them that first night, uh, can you tell us why you're here? You know, what's your story? And usually what'll happen is they'll give us a highly edited version,
Hmm.
because they don't know how the others in the room are going to react. But typically what happens, even that first night, as they begin to tell even their edited story, the others in the room are nodding their head in agreement, and they're identifying with with every story that is being told that evening. And that becomes a safe, and I would even say sacred place, where they're telling those stories without any kind of rejection,
And that's where
because
healing
each
begins.
person there has had some type of similar experience. And then when they realize that everyone in that room is just like them,
Hmm.
then all of the barriers are gone. And then, uh, the real storytelling begins. Um, and then as they get that out of themselves, uh, that's a huge relief in itself. And it seems like once they can get that story out of themselves, they're much more open to begin hearing that they're not unlovable and not unforgivable. They are forgivable. They are lovable. And we begin to help them walk that way back. And some of the stories or some of the things we've seen is just nothing short of phenomenal.
Just miracle after miracle happening in these rooms.
It really is. And what's great is when they get to the point where they can begin to share with their spouse or their family what they experienced, um, and then experience that unconditional love from their family. Um, that just takes them to a whole new level of restoration. And then they do that, and then they want to experience a restoration with God as well. And um, we help them with that as well. Now, granted, we have to, we're in a setting where there's different faith groups, so we kind of help guide them back to their own faith group. Uh, but if, say, they're Christian, or even if they're Jewish, we can point them to Numbers 31. So if you look in Numbers 31, you see that's the battle between the Hebrews and the Midianites. After the Midianites have tried to use their women to draw the Hebrews astray. And so, God says um, they've gone beyond where they should go. You got to take them out. Otherwise, they're going to lead our people astray. And so the Hebrews defeat the Midianites in battle. They're coming back, and they're stopped outside of camp. They're stopped outside of the camp. And they're told for the next 7 days, you have to sit outside of the camp. You have to think about what has happened. And also, over the next 7 days, twice, you need to rededicate yourself to God and dedicate everything you used in the battle, and everything that you captured has to be dedicated to God before you can come back into the camp and rejoin the society. So
There's a reason for that.
even though they were doing what God told them to do, God recognized that killing people made in the image of God was messy.
Mm-hmm.
It it did stuff to you. It tears at the soul. And so you don't just come home from that and just rejoin society like it's nothing. You got to work through that. And I think that's a beautiful example of that in Numbers 31. And so
Yeah, I have that written down.
ha- having some kind of ritual, exercise, something like that, that kind of is a oh doorway to restoration. Really helps these individuals when they're ready. They have to be ready. You can't force that on them.
You can't force healing on anybody. They have to be ready for it themselves. So I
Very
do agree. Um, the way you explain this all, it you don't realize how much it resonates when or how you could be possibly on the road for that, you
hmm
know, because I'm just sitting here going, wow, I didn't realize that, and or this is something I've never even heard of, or we don't talk about it because it's just set on as a mental health problem. It's not. It doesn't have it doesn't have an actual name, and that's where I feel that talking about moral injury definitely will open up a lot of eyes and have a lot of people recognize that, hey, I actually know somebody with that, and and be able to help them and be there for them for that, because shame is definitely something that is very easy to have in society to press on, and being a safe ground, like you're talking about safe spaces and everything like that. That's what we have here. That's what we like to hold. There's no judgment here. There's no reason to have shame here. because, you know, I have shame that I have that inner critic still in my head, and I'm learning how to, to not listen to it. um, and I know that so many other people deal with inner critics and shame way worse than I do, you
Hmm.
know. But thank you for being so open about it and teaching us about it.
My pleasure. Yeah, exactly with what you're saying. Guilt says I did something bad. Shame says I am bad. Moral injury says I'm unlovable and unforgivable. And there is a path back from that.
Yes. I agree. I do completely agree. And I feel that the more that it's talked about, and the more people we're able to recognize it and see it, the more we're able to bring down those suicide rates, the more we're able to bring down, the death rates, period. Because yeah, I just wow. You have
Well,
me speechless.
that's, well, I was going to say that's my goal, not the speechless part, but uh, but being able to get that message of hope and restoration out there, and also education on moral injury.
I didn't even realize there was not that much to it, and just goes to prove that you're wrong, or that I'm wrong, not you, but I am. And I just want to go backtrack on what my mom said about having that little thing on the shoulder.
Hmm.
If anybody's ever seen Kronk's or Emperor's New Groove or Kronk, that's what I think. I have the little angel and the little devil. I always have the conscience, and that's what I always have on my shoulders. And I'm always the battle between the two. I've always had that.
Yeah,
But
that's it. And many people with moral injury, all they see is the devil.
Hmm.
yes, and I really hope this reaches the right people that really need it and that really want to that you know, even the people who know somebody, that way they know that they're not that person can find out that they're not alone.
Yeah, and if I encourage them to get the book, not because it'll make me rich, that's not going to happen. Um, but to get that, and I think that way they'll have something solid that they can continue to go back to. That's in very plain English, um, and so that it's helpful to be understood, and it also gives them some suggestions on how to move forward with helping their loved one.
Yes.
Absolutely. And again, all they have to do is just search up your name, Larry Brandt,
Hmm.
on Amazon. You can find his book, and it's accessible. And I think it is an absolute read. Maybe even if you're not quite sure if you even know somebody, because again, like we stated, it's not only combat military people that are dealing with these kind of things.
Very,
There
very
are
true.
regular, ordinary people that are standing right next to you, working right next to you, that you may not understand, but they just need somebody
Yeah,
to know that they're
very true.
okay. So, thank you again, Larry. This was uh, absolutely amazing. And I really, really, like I said, well, we're going to most definitely put, all the information in the footnotes and all that. And thank you. For those of you that would like to share your story, we also accept anonymous stories. We understand that you may not want them to know who you are, but your story can still make an impact without the name being attached. You can email us at 12 looking through THRU 34 theglass at gmail.com. You can reach us on our TikTok. You can reach us on our Facebook. And thank you for looking through the glass. Giselle, anything you had at?
Thank you for looking through the glass.
Larry?
Thank you for looking through the glass.